everyone. All right, great to see you. Welcome to Why Wait? Say that with me. Why wait? Why wait? Why wait? I'm Corey Kennard, Reimagine's board chair, and I'm joining you all the way from literally just got off the plane, Detroit, Michigan. So go Lions. Okay, we'll leave that alone. All right. So anyway, uh, thank you for being here, both in person and those who are online right now. We appreciate you being here from around the world. We have a worldwide audience. Isn't that great? Let's clap our hands for those who are joining us online as well. Tonight, we're here to share a powerful story, a story that highlights the ripple effects of and the impact that can happen when we turn toward rather than away from life's hardest moments. Before we dive in, let me share with you why tonight matters so much. People everywhere are hurting. We all go through pain, we all go through loss, we all go through adversity. But our culture makes it really hard to talk about these things. It feels like we're trapped in what we call mental prisons. Anybody ever been in a mental prison? A fog where it's been hard, where it's been rough. And we can't really see our way out. There are a lot of people who are in such a position. But what do people really want? They don't just want to cope. They want to grow, they want to find meaning, and they want to thrive in the face of every challenge that they have. That's where Reimagine comes in. We're creating spaces like tonight's event, both online and offline or in person. And so we want to create spaces where people can connect. We want to create spaces where people can open up. We want to create spaces where people can find support around life's hardest topics, which are loss, adversity, and mortality. Now, since 2017, we've hosted, get this, it's on the screen here, over 4,000 events to make these conversations possible. Over 4,000. Oh, you can clap to that, yes. And the impact is very real when we really think about it. When we ask our community, here's another great statistic, and this is why Reimagine exists. When we ask our community, 71% of them say that Reimagine is the only place where they found this kind of accessible and engaging support when it comes to pain and grief and suffering. And here's the key. People want meaning, they want connection, and people want hope. They want to have joy alongside of their healing process. That's why we're committed to creating these spaces for not just a few people, but everyone, especially those who are underrepresented in communities where they have places that are fewer to turn to, such as Reimagine. And so before we move forward, I have two very exciting announcements to share with you tonight. First, we are thrilled to announce the launch of our Healing and Growth platform, which is now in its pilot phase. This platform is designed to bring Reimagine's impact not to thousands, but to millions. It's a low-cost, accessible, engaging, and it supports individuals and entire communities over time. Think of it like sort of a grief, pain Instagram, right? But it's a lot healthier, trust me. So instead of endless scrolling, it fosters real connection and helps people respond to life's pain in ways that are authentic and transformative. This is about healing. This is about growth. This is about creating a better way forward. And second, besides the platform, The second great announcement that I have is this. An anonymous donor has stepped forward to amplify the impact of tonight's event. This means that every dollar raised tonight will be quadrupled. Can I say that again? Every dollar raised tonight will be quadrupled. This will unlock up to, get this, $1 million to help support everything that we're going to talk about tonight, including the Healing and Growth Platform. This is an incredible opportunity to ensure that more people have access to the support they need to face life's challenges and grow from them. And now, I'm honored to introduce my friend, my colleague in this work, Reimagine's Executive Director, Brad Wolf, who will guide us through the remainder. He can get a couple hand claps in a second. Guide us through the remainder of this program. And Brad's vision and leadership have been instrumental in creating the space, especially this space, for healing, for reflection, and for growth. So, my friend, my dear friend Brad, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, big round of applause for our board chair, Corey Kennard. Corey literally got off a plane from Detroit about an hour ago and made his way here. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you here who have showed up in person in the Bay Area, all of you online. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to our other board members in attendance, the host committee, the Reimagine staff who tirelessly worked to put all of this together, and these incredible panelists that you're going to see here this evening. It's really become a family affair. So, welcome. Tonight, through Peter and Jane's story, and through the incredible panelists that you're all going to meet, we are going to see an unfolding story, an unfolding narrative of how we're all connected through the hard parts of life. We're all connected by loss and mortality, but we're also connected by the way in which we respond to it. The event's title is about living fully through life's challenges. Before we begin, I just want to take a pause to share, what does it mean when we say living fully through the hard parts of life? For Reimagine, living fully means this idea, it's a scientific concept called post-traumatic growth. We all know people who, out of something hard, report some of these powerful transformations. They feel after something hard a deeper sense of purpose, a sense of new life possibilities. Sometimes after something hard, relationships can improve. People can feel, I'm stronger after having gone through that thing. After something hard, you can have a greater appreciation for life. There's a lot of research to suggest that this is a phenomenon that happens for many people, but not for everybody. And the question we like to ask at Reimagine is, why is it that some people, two people might have the exact same life circumstance, and one person can report post-traumatic growth, and another person can not be living fully through that pain? And so our mission is really about, how do we help everybody respond in ways that lead to post-traumatic growth? Now, the question is, how do we actually do that? How do we live fully through the hard stuff? And we have looked at a body of research around post-traumatic growth that is emergent over the last 20 years and developed a methodology that works. Now, I'm going to tell you about that because this is what's going to be the center of our conversation this evening. At Reimagine, we have this idea called sparks. These are the hard parts of life. They might be the loss of a loved one. It might be financial hardship. We're going to talk tonight about serious diagnosis. In fact, we're going to talk about many of these things on this panel, the hard parts of life, and how do we navigate them to end up flourishing? The methodology suggests that believing that growth is possible is one of the best ways to heal. We need to know that it's possible to make it through something and come out the other side. It's not a sentence. And to do that, listening to stories, real authentic stories of how people truly navigate these challenges is one way to begin to believe that growth is possible. Building emotional regulation. It's not just about growth and transformation, it's about being able to be with what is hard. How do we sit with it? And that's why we need to practice emotional regulation, whether that's mindfulness, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's journaling. How do we ground ourselves and be with what is hard and regulate our emotional state? Research also suggests that sharing your story in a safe community when you're going through something hard, if you have somebody you can turn to share that story, that is a healing opportunity. So some of that's going to take place this evening. Then it's developing a new narrative. So after something hard, what new goals might emerge out of a loss, out of something challenging that you can turn to that open up new possibility? Maybe not just in spite of what was hard, but maybe even because of it. And finally, and this is why we're so drawn to this post-traumatic growth methodology, the idea that we can heal best when we engage in creativity and acts of service. That acts of service in the area of our own pain has been shown to be one of the surest fire ways to actually heal ourselves. But the power of that is in the process of healing ourselves, we're also healing the world. So in our vision for the world, what if in this time when there's so much suffering on an individual and also collective level, what if this was the response? How would this circle look? And so that's why, as Corey shared, we've developed this platform to bring all of this together and to support people and make this whole process accessible on a mass scale. That's our vision. And that's the backdrop around which I want to bring up this conversation with our incredible protagonists this evening, Peter and Jane Carpenter. So Peter and Jane are remarkable people, individually and as a couple. Peter and Jane, we'll start with Peter just for a second. Words like smoke jumper, Harvard, Vietnam veteran. He was a military assistant to one of our presidents, Lyndon Johnson. ARPA, the OMB, the Price Commission, Stanford Medical Center, where he was executive director. ALZA, elected to his fire district. He's been on dozens of nonprofits, a life of service and value and passion and just heart. And then his incredible wife, Jane, who herself is a trailblazer, broken so many glass ceilings on her journey. From running ALZA Pharmaceutical, there was Boise Cascade, McKesson, she was the board chair of Intel. It goes on, but they have both dedicated themselves to creating meaningful impact in the world. So when Peter received a diagnosis recently, initially thought to be terminal, a lot changed in their life. Not just for them, but for all the people that you're going to see on this stage this evening. We've all been connected through this unfolding narrative, and that's what happens in life. So tonight we're going to explore their journey in 3 parts. What life looked like before this diagnosis, the changes that it inspired, and then how Reimagine has begun to shape and reshape their narrative. So Peter and Jane, thank you for being here, first of all. And let's make sure we get you guys a microphone. That's one thing I want to make sure we definitely do. So before I want to start with this. Before the diagnosis that we're going to talk about, you've both lived extraordinary lives, had extraordinary careers. How would you describe your outlook on life and your priorities prior to this diagnosis? What guided you in your work and in your personal life?
I'll start. Okay, well, I think I was probably in spite of the fact I could never hold a job, and so I kept doing different things. The sort of standard American male success-oriented individual who always wanted to do better and move from one job to another job and have an impact. But I also was raised in a family where public service was a value that was just deeply cherished. And so at each step in my life, I've always been involved in some form of community service. And prior to this diagnosis, I just viewed that, life was going to go on forever. And I would continue to work with my nonprofits and continue to do the mentoring that I most enjoy with younger people. And so it was learning and serving and mentoring were the three things that really drove my life. And fortunately, over 40 years ago, I met this wonderful woman at my left who became a mainstay of that life. And I think that we're on, I would describe it as very much parallel journeys where we were together, but Jane was pursuing a life that she will describe in the corporate profit world, and I ended up spending the latter 30 years of my life in the nonprofit world, but always focused on.
Good job, my friend.
It was always focused on a future out there, and never focusing on the downside.
Perhaps our virtual audience thinks you did a good job.
Jane?
I record this meeting, so I'm not active.
Oh, maybe could it be me? Could I? I don't think so. That's so interesting.
Who knows?
The future.
No. Time's up. I'm keeping my eye on the paddles here, so
Oh, they aren't raised
we got to
yet.
keep moving.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everybody, for being. I met Peter, and we've been married. We met at the Alsa Corporation, and we've been married some 42 years. And I reflect often about what happened. I grew up in the United Kingdom. I had no intentions of ever moving to America, but opportunity arose and I moved. I've led a very, very rich life, and I've been very, very lucky. As I say, born and educated in the UK. And there was 4 discrete phases of my professional life. First, for 9 years, I was a basic research scientist in the field of physiology on the forefront of identification and the actions they caused. They're now known as the prostaglandins, and they are well acknowledged to play a significant role in our bodies and have been turned into certain pharmaceutical compounds now, both human and veterinary. That was for 9 years. For 24 years, I was with the Alsa Corporation in Palo Alto, and it's lovely to see some of my friends from those days here tonight. Alsa was just a remarkable place, a remarkable institution. And I think the best way I can say is that as you looked at that company, people who worked there long after the company was sold on the 50th anniversary of the initial founding of Alsa, 900 people turned up for a reunion. It was truly, truly remarkable. I started as a research scientist, and for the last 4 years, in my 24 years there, I was the president and chief operating officer. I then went on to 4 years of consultancy into pharma and biotech companies, and began a lot of board work with interesting companies, public and private, and also nonprofit. For the next 22 years, I was involved with a company called Reimagine. Reimagine focused on delivery of drugs to the lungs, development of technology, very small particles. You could get drugs to the deep lungs. It's a sad thing to say, but COVID was a heyday for Reimagine because how the technology was needed. I took the company public, and my last board meeting heralding the end of my professional life was, guess when? May 2024. So just last May. So I have faith, and I don't believe in coincidences. They happen for a reason. And I think the reason was that was the time that we received news that Peter was going to need more of my time and more of my care. As I mentioned, we'd been married 42 years. Like any marriage, we had our ups and downs, but we had forged a great partnership in life. And I'll give you some examples. We remodeled or built a house together 3 times. Now, Peter was the systems and technology person. I was design and furnishings. And the only item we got stuck on was, what was the electric blanket? I had responsibility for keeping the social calendar, was always the social secretary. Peter followed in that respect. Together, we've enjoyed theatre. We've been many times to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and I was on the board there for a while. We've rafted the Colorado River together, the full length of it, twice. We built a home in the UK. We built a home in Kybers in the Sierras on the South Fork of the American River, and we've enjoyed both of those homes. We put them together, and we've enjoyed them together many, many times. Now, along that journey, and I just name a few of the things that we have shared, Peter began to have some health issues. In 2002, he was diagnosed with CLL, resulting from exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam service. In 2005, he had his first heart attack, which was treated with 2 stents. In 2012, a 3rd stent was placed. In 2018, he had bypass surgery. And in 2024, it was the finding that he had a reduced ejection fraction from his heart, which was the first diagnosis that we considered untreatable and began to realize what might lie ahead.
So maybe you can share with us then about the diagnosis itself and how that experience has changed your lives.
Well, yeah. As I said, we like, I think most everybody in this audience goes about day-to-day life, thinking about the future is just that, the future, and never thinking about the fact that there is an end. What?
We're getting a request for you to get that mic to your face.
Oh, okay, fine. And I think most of us focus on day-to-day activity and the future and don't realize that we live in a very time-limited space. And particularly in our culture, it's not a very acceptable thing to talk about the end of life and death and tragedy. And we try to have those things sort of be behind the screen. And I had discovered in 2002 when I was diagnosed with leukemia, and at that time it was the initial diagnosis was a very grim one. And most people diagnosed with CLL die within 2 years. And we had close friends who had suffered that illness. By a very small miracle, I happened to have a very rare form of CLL, which turns out to be more benign. And that was determined by a brilliant UK researcher who sent me an email after taking a blood sample in his library one day that I would die of something else. So once again, we just took that off the table. But there was something that was at the time that, I was working with my primary care physician, Dr. Lars Arsterberg, and I had been quite ill in England in January, February. We came back, and They did a diagnostic procedure which said, you know, your ejection fraction is now down to 22%, which sounds really grim. And the next thing I knew, I was assigned, I get all my health care at the VA, by the way, in Palo Alto, which has just been superb. I was suddenly assigned to the advanced heart failure clinic and the palliative care clinic. That's a message. And when I first went to the advanced heart failure clinic, the first thing I said to them is, "You guys need to change your name." So what this did is sort of brought everything to a halt, and we went through a process of reevaluation. What needs to be done? What about our bank accounts? What about this? What about that? And started thinking about the fact that I would not be here very long. And let's make sure Jen gets a new car. Let's make sure she knows how to run all the technology in the house. But then a transformation began, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, probably more. And as Brad questions us, is that then all of the connections in life began to sort of come together. And how we moved forward is the story, one of the stories that we want to share with you tonight. I'm not sure we want to, I think that's the next stage of this. So, but the main thing was we came to a complete halt. And we took all of our prior assumptions and all of our prior priorities and just put them aside. And it was something we were ill-equipped for. And filling that gap is something that has become a mission for both of us. And you'll hear tonight some of the ways that we've tried through Brad and Stephanie to fill the gap and to perhaps create an example for others.
I'd like to share the screen though for a second. If we can, yeah, if we can share the screen, I do have a, Peter actually, when we first got in contact, I was connected to Peter through a friend that you're going to meet in a minute. Her name is Lindsay. She'll be dialing in from Africa in about 30 seconds. But she connected us because she was hoping that Reimagine would host a life celebration, more of like a living wake for Peter, a way to celebrate somebody before the end. Because at Reimagine, we think, why wait? And so what's interesting is Peter's diagnosis, as we'll describe in a little bit more detail, has transitioned and morphed. And actually, there's maybe more time than he thought in life. And so this event has shifted on Peter's accord from really being a living wake to an event about waking up and living. And so Peter sent me this email. He had made a list upon the diagnosis of all the steps that he had wanted to take after receiving this diagnosis. And I took the liberty of highlighting the first one, which his first thing he really wanted to do was celebrate life. And I'm curious, Peter, this is the last question before we bring Lindsay in for both of you. But in the wake of this diagnosis, how has it helped you? In what ways are you celebrating life? What new actions are you taking on account of this this relationship with mortality?
Well, the thing that's most important is just celebrate every day. You know, look at your partner, hug them, tell them you love them. One of the things, the profound things that happened to me is that for the first time in my adult life, I really got in touch with my inner emotions. And so it's been a big transformation for me. But I think Jane also has a lot of thoughts about where we were at the time of diagnosis.
Well, not really. For me, the first thing was to see Peter become very vulnerable and fragile. And I think you can see that even to today. We quite don't have that set yet. But when we face this, both of us became really action oriented. We came to an agreement on a path forward, and we got a lot to cram into a short time. So it included things like more travel we needed to do. And we went on a trip to the UK. We went on a train trip across Canada. We went to OSF, to the theatre again. I mean, sort of crazy stuff. We did too much. We came home from that event and we both got COVID. And then later on top of that, I picked up pneumonia at the same time. But we still stayed active. We checked our wills, our trusts, our advanced medical directives. Peter reached out to many people sharing the not good news. I think went inward, contemplating what my life would be. What would it be like without Peter? He managed all our finances. He made all our travel plans. He understands how our home and all the technology works. And I realized that I was going to have to go back to school in some different things. But out of this 2-month period, and that was really, really rough, there came some good news. And you're going to hear about it later, I think, from perhaps a little from Stephanie, that new tests indicated that death was not as imminent as we thought it would be. As we've been led to believe. So we realized that we had more time. So where are we now? Much better prepared for the inevitable. I have changed. We sat and talked about this, and I said, "Are these true? Do you see these changes in me? Am I more gentle than I was? Am I more empathetic?" The answer was yes. I'm trying to offload Peter from some of the chores he's done throughout our marriage, like finance and all the travel bookings. I actually booked my first own travel a month ago, so I'm making progress too. We're communicating much, much better. We're spending more time together. We're taking naps together. I think at this point, our life feels to us both so much richer, and our life is certainly happier. A strange thing to say.
And some notes here that I don't want to skip over. The main thing that changed is, instead of saying, well, someday we'll do that, it became, well, let's do it now. Let's have the conversation now. Let's not put the conversation next week. And the most important thing is that facing a terminal diagnosis is not a solo event. It's a team event. And Jane has been my partner. Our friends, the neighbors that we have in Park Forest, Carol and Leighton Reed, Lindsay, who we hear from, Bethany, who's here, Ed and Gigi Williams, Peter Burton, a variety of other people who've been just an important part of our lives. And that network became an incredible safety net. Our family, particularly the UK family, and my sister Candace, who I hadn't seen for years, has now re-entered my life in a wonderful way. And the medical team has been superb. I mentioned Dr. Osterberg is my primary care physician. Stephanie, who runs the Advanced Heart Failure Clinic, has become not only a superb clinical support, but a great friend and an inspiration. Jim Wolfe, who I was introduced to through Brad, helped me in an incredibly difficult period from the pulmonary complications of what I was going through. Norman Gross, my hematologist, Ellen Bader, a psychologist that Jane and I have worked with for years. Kathy Rentschler, who's Jane's primary care physician, was right there and helping. Leighton Reed, we mentioned earlier, is not only a friend, but a very capable doctor. And so one of the things I learned from this is the tremendous importance of the support system of friends and family. And sometimes when you're faced with something like this, the tendency is to withdraw. And all I can say is that don't. Because reaching out to your friends and family is going to be an absolutely incredible godsend for you.
It's so profound to hear from you both, and especially to underline that life is richer. In terms of the richness of life, we're going to make some richness happen right here by turning on this screen here and dialing in Lindsay Holly Handler, if we may, from Africa.
Hello, everyone.
1 sec, we're getting you up to, oh, here you are. Yes, we see you. Lindsay, okay, incredible. Now, Lindsay Holly Handler is a dear friend. She's an entrepreneur, an investor with 21 plus years of experience leading impactful businesses in Africa. She's the co-founder and managing partner of Delta 40 that invests in and scales tech ventures to support transformation of human beings all over the world. She was the former CEO of Phoenix International. Lindsay lives a life of service and transformation on a really big scale. And part of her journey was sparked by Peter and Jane, who served as really mentors for Lindsay. And it was Lindsay who first introduced myself to Peter and Jane. And we're so grateful you've joined us here, Lindsay, all the way from, I believe, are you in Kenya?
I am calling in from Kenya in the wee hours of the morning. Yes. And I'm so thrilled to be here with dear friends of 20 plus years and many others, thinking about this really important topic of how do we live life fully through trauma and through service. So thank you so much for having me.
So Lindsay, maybe you can share a little bit about how you know Peter and Jane.
I will. So I met Peter 20 years ago this year. I was a student at Stanford and I was a fellow with the Haas Center for Public Service designing a service project in Tanzania. And Peter was already in the phase of his life of focusing on service and was a mentor assigned to me. And I met him for my first coffee in Palo Alto. And I remember that very first hour I ever met Peter, I came with a proposal about 50 pages long and was going to tell him all about my project. And he immediately actually taught me about leadership in this moment where he said, I'm excited to see the proposal and hear about the details later, but I want to hear about you and your leadership and your goals and the impact you want to create, not the strategy, not the numbers. And really, at the time, and I think in life, as Peter said, very few people focus on mission and values and humans in the process. And Peter gave me permission in that moment, given his incredible career that you've heard about tonight, to know that that is actually what is most important. And that's what great leaders do. And it helped me feel comfortable deciding to, at that moment, focus on a life of service instead of going to McKinsey, which was my option number 2. So Peter, thank you for saving me from a dreadful life as a consultant. And for actually, and I will say, you said, Brad, in your intro that Peter was one of the people that impacted me. But I do really want to say to you, Peter, today, and to Jane, that your mentorship completely changed the direction of my entire life. And for everyone in the audience, mentorship of young people can not just have like a little impact, but can actually really transform lives. And so Peter and Jane, I've spent the last 10 years, 15 years being mentored by them. And just want to mention one more thing. 5 years after I met Peter and Jane, they sponsored a fellowship for me to spend 1 year living in rural Africa, doing the work I was passionate about, building businesses that could help people get out of poverty in rural Africa. And it was this fellowship where I lived in the village and really connected. And going back to this comment of connection, connected with people, learned about their needs, and learned how to more deeply live a life of service. And ever since then, my husband and I have been living together in Africa. We raised our children in Africa, all because of this very small but incredibly impactful fellowship that Peter and Jane gave me. And just want to say, in April of this year, I was able to spend time with Peter and Jane at their farm in the UK. And we haven't talked too much about this, but I learned there that they have actually created a community in Jane's home. And that has, again, inspired me to think about, where do I want to be in 30 years? And the way you've built a community of family, where you could be anywhere in the world, that's where you chose to put your effort as well. So I just want to say thank you so much, Peter and Jane. This is a moment I've been wanting to have for a long time. Thank you for the way you've lived your lives and inspired me and so many others here.
I hope you can hear the applause in the room, Lindsay, for this connection. I'm curious, Lindsay, what inspired you to connect Peter and Jane to Reimagine, and what were you hoping for via this introduction?
Yes, well, so I've been very lucky to know Brad for 24 years as well, and I know Brad's deep passion for creating connection, not just in celebration, but actually through trauma and grief. And he's been doing that since I met him 24 years ago, when he lost his friend, and really used music to help heal, and then really took on this tough challenge of, how do we approach end of life in a way that, how do we celebrate people before they die? How do we make the most of our life while we're here? And I think very few people are willing to have these hard conversations. And as Peter shared his diagnosis with me, I just really immediately thought of Reimagine. And I thought, how do we connect Peter and Jane, who've lived a life of service and meaning and are actually going into a deeper phase of that, with Reimagine, and create a celebration that really does inspire other people to live life differently. So just couldn't be more thrilled with this partnership.
And Lindsay, last question for you here is, you yourself have lived through your own sparks. And, you said you were willing to maybe share a couple of seconds about what you went through, and how your experience kind of dovetails on the themes that we're talking about here this evening.
Yeah, so thank you, Brad. I will say that actually tonight is the first night I've ever publicly spoken about this experience I've had. So it is quite emotional, but I will share very briefly and concisely a bit of my trauma that has deepened my own commitment to service. So in 2013, my husband, Nick, my daughter, Julia, and I was 8 months pregnant. We were in a terrorist attack in Kenya. We had stopped at a mall called Westgate just to buy a birthday present for my daughter's friend. And we were supposed to be there for 30 minutes and grab a quick meal. And in that first 10 minutes, several gunmen entered the mall and ended up spending the next 24 hours targeting Christians, and particularly Americans. Many people were shot, grenades were deployed, and actually my 2-year-old daughter and my husband were just meters from the center of it all. We were separated, and we spent several hours, separated. I with my unborn son, Miles, and of course you can just imagine, I don't need to share the details, but for those several hours and for those many years after that, it makes you really reevaluate absolutely everything in your entire life. Wondering if you are going to survive. We were all four of us were very, very lucky, especially given where my husband and my daughter were, that we all did survive that terrorist attack that day. And when I reflected, even in that time and especially the weeks after, I just wanted to share two things that Brad asked me to share. I first and foremost, like immediately really did realize that there were so many helpers. There were so many more people that were good and that helped us in that moment than that were bad. And the news wants to make you feel, focus on the bad, but actually one of the heroes who saved all of us that day was Somali. And the gunmen were also Somali in this mall, but actually the hero that risked his life, went into the mall and saved hundreds of us was an incredible Somali man. So I think for me, I just really learned that we all through trauma need to focus on the good, need to connect with the good and create community with the good people. And through that, and we need to help other people. People wanted to kind of point out, the way Muslim terrorists attacked people in Kenya and wanted to create a fear and a hate. And I think for me, I just learned how important it was to amplify the stories that actually there were many Muslims, there were many Somalis that actually saved our lives and actually went above and beyond. So how do we all really focus on the good was one takeaway for me, and build community. And then the second thing I'll say is that Nick and I, of course, had to reflect, do we stay in Kenya? Is it safe for our young family? Our family did want us to come back to America, and we had to have some really difficult conversations. But after looking at all the options, we decided to stay in Africa and continue a life of service. And, in some ways, I'll be very open with this group here today. Probably I was dealing with a lot of this down and away and focused on work, but at the same time, focusing on service and creating good out of difficult times really helped me heal and helped create new and more connections. And for me, I hope today that those feeling grief and trauma, if there are ways you can engage in service around that trauma or even adjacent to it, for me, that brought a lot of healing. And again, Peter and Jane, that wouldn't have been possible without you. So I'm just really thrilled to be able to share this little story today. And I know so many people joining us in person and online have dealt with trauma and grief, and excited to listen and hear about how you guys have all processed that and how Reimagine, just want to recognize Reimagine. I really think I need more platforms where I can connect with people who've been through something similar to me and actually process that and find service with them. So I'm thrilled about what Imagine's building.
Lindsay, thank you so much. Thank you. I do want to keep this going, but maybe Peter and Jane, one sentence response each to Lindsay. Is Lindsay still there?
Yes.
Okay. Where'd she go?
There's a wonderful expression that children are messengers that we send to a future we cannot see. And I think the same thing is true of mentees. We live in the lives of the people that we mentor. Thank you, Lindsay.
Don't know what to say, Lindsay. You're the best. Thanks for all you've done for the African people. And I'm sure you get those thanks many times, but I wish we had time to tell the audience of the incredible technology you developed, with the impact that you made, and you're starting out on an even bigger venture now. I'll tell people in the audience later who asked. Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you so much. Now it is my privilege to bring up a cadre of three. Oh, I guess it's the perfect time to bring them up. I want to bring up Stephanie Shao, James Higa, and James Wolfe to the stage. Each of these three people who I'm bringing up now, like Lindsay, have been part of this unfolding narrative around what happens, what kinds of ripples of impact and transformation happen through life's hardest places. Now we're going to kind of go down the line here and have a little check-in with each of you about your experience with Peter and Jane and how that's reshaping your lives and also the world. First, I want to start with Stephanie, an advanced heart failure and transplant cardiologist at Stanford University. Stephanie is passionate about rehumanizing medicine, about helping physicians integrate the loss and pain they carry and encounter to create sustainable and healthier careers and lives for themselves and their patients. And she's our proud partner we're going to talk about it in a second, at Reimagine Doctoring, which is just launched at Stanford. Stephanie, as Peter's cardiologist, you've been closely involved in his health journey. How has that experience shaped your perspective on the role of physicians, including yourself, in these deeply human moments?
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and truly, truly an honor to be here. I, was listening to all this story and then felt like this is a surreal, really surreal moment of authentic human stories on display that the world so needs right now. I would say it's really interesting to hear about, the background story of how diagnosis was made before you met me, and then kind of like already contemplating life and death, and or even living wake before Peter and Jane, both of you guys walked into my office. I would say my first impression, I go on with my day. So as the bad name of the clinic, as you mentioned, Peter, it's advanced heart failure. And so so I it's a subspecialty in cardiology that I see patients with end-stage heart failure. And so the difference between cardiac disease nowadays to 30 or 40 years ago, where a lot of focus is on heart attack, myocardial infarction, we have almost perfected that with good stents, aspirins, statins, lifestyle modification. So everyone is living longer, and most people do not die from heart attack. And so in sequence of that is that the heart does age at some point. And these gradual kind of injury to the heart through repeated heart attack like you had, Peter, or other forms of injury eventually result in weakness of the heart, and that is called heart failure. And heart failure has different stages, A, B, C, D. When I met Peter, he's already at stage D. And in reviewing his history in my mind, I already know what kind of conversation I would be having as I walk into the room. It's a man in his 80s with heart diagnosis for more than 10 years, repeated heart injury, and eventually with an ejection fraction drop. So in my mind, I know time is limited. So I walked in and I did not anticipate seeing a dashing man with a beautiful woman in suits and notes ready. I have heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. I believe I need beta blocker and angiotensin inhibitor, empagliflozin. And I also have a pacemaker that I know is not functioning very well. And so immediately I, just feel like I got this, our brains are connected. I can just, it's like speaking to a scientist. And the conversation just flows very well. I lay out the treatment plan, and then and I would say it's kind of like a occupational disease that, even though my job is in advanced heart failure, the prescription of this job for myself is actually helping people live and helping to make them feel better. And in some way, I have some denial around death myself, which I can go over later. But I see every patient as there's no problem that we cannot fix right now. I have at least 20 drugs I can try. And then if that doesn't work, we can put you on a continuous adrenaline infusion. If that doesn't work with the right age group, we can do heart transplant and mechanical heart pump. But with Peter's age, our options are limited for the transplant. And so, here I am having conversation with Peter, laying out treatment plan. That's try A, B, C, D. We'll revisit in a month. And then every month, I see you, and then we have these conversations about what's working, what's not working. And then I gradually start seeing Peter getting a little bit better each time. And in my mind, I was cautiously optimistic, but I didn't want to say too early. Um, and at the same time, I'm starting to realize that, you know what, his symptoms are not matching up with what I'm seeing objectively. And so started pointing more towards the pulmonary pathway once I completely optimize his heart failure. And then later he was able to connect with actually Brad's father, and then got a also world-class, amazing treatment for lung function, and then eventually really restore a renewed quality of life. And that was a very incredible moment for myself that, yes, you know, like we escaped death. And in some way, I think I was, you know, it was hard for me to talk about the alternative. And then Peter was actually the one that said one day, "Oh, Stephanie, what about death?" And I was like, "You feel good, and I think you're okay. And the right heart catheterization and your exercise stress test, I think we got a few more years." And he's like, "Well, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, connected with Reimagine. I'm planning my living wake." And then it just hit me at that moment. And then I was like, "You're right, Peter. And I'm sorry I didn't talk about it because I'm uncomfortable about it." And I feel like medical care system, even though I had training in palliative care through internal medicine as part of the required thing, it was a very dichotomous situation that we don't send patients to palliative care unless we exhausted everything. And then it was almost like a warm and cold handoff. And then you feel like your job is done, and then the other person takes over the baton. And there's something really inhuman about that process that I myself hasn't able to really do it very eloquently. And then so when Peter mentioned that, it really, I admit to my own ignorance and denial, and then started having some more beautiful conversations around that.
I just wanted to, yeah, let's just, the more applause, the better. What a beautiful story of, you know, to have both of you here in the same room, patient and physician, and the relationship you forged shows that it is a human process. I want to apologize in advance. I'm going to try to keep this night going forward, so I may interject in future responses to keep things moving. But I love everything that's been said so far, so I don't really want to. I would love to ask though, Stephanie, you know, you talk about humanizing medicine now and about helping physicians through this relationship get closer to mortality in a different way, in a different relationship with the hard parts of life. And that's something now through Peter that we are now having the opportunity to work on together. But I'm curious about your own journey. If you wouldn't mind sharing a snapshot of what has inspired you to really want to humanize or rehumanize medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this discomfort around death actually stemmed from a personal trauma of my own that I also, very similar to Lindsay, that started talking about it publicly not too long ago, maybe a year ago, because I felt like I had to heal to a certain point in order to speak. So I grew up in Taiwan. I came to the US when I was 14 years old, and went to high school in San Francisco, a boarding school. My parents are still in Taiwan. And the reason I left Taiwan is because my mother was in an abusive relationship. And in me, I felt like I want to be that woman that can make a career and can bring money home, bring my mom out, and everything will be fine. And I really love medicine for some reason, just watching too much ER show when I was in Taiwan with Chinese subtitle. So I came, I worked really hard, got straight A's, went to UC Berkeley. And then I fell madly in love with this young man in electrical engineering. And this is before Facebook social media time. And he was about to get a job at Facebook. I have no idea what that was at that time. But, you know, we were thinking about getting engaged. And that summer, when we have a plan to drive from Los Angeles back to San Francisco, and I got into a huge argument with him because I was I don't know, I even forgot like the content of the argument, just being emotional at that age. And then I decided not to get into the car. And then his mother got into the car with him. And then they drove. And then they had a head-on collision with a truck coming on. And he was 1 year ahead of me. So I still have one more year to finish at UC Berkeley. I got straight D's. I couldn't think anymore. Deep depression. And then I withdrew from Berkeley. And there was a point in my life that, like, it was so much pain, so much sadness, and also so much shame of like, I really have failed on so many levels. You know, like I can't bring my mom out. I, you know, like I built a dream and then now it's all shattered. And then how did it shatter is because I fell in love with a man, and then which like at that time was like, I'm gonna be a strong woman. I can't do this. And then it was I had to redefine myself. And I remember so many nights on the floor crying and just ask, you know, like the universe. I don't have a religion foundation, but I just ask or pray that if I wake up, if I keep going, give me a chance and then help me rebuild my life. And then it did, you know, like now 20 plus years later, I was able to train at some of the top institutions at UCSF, at Stanford. I'm married to a loving husband. I have a 10-year-old son. I'm practicing medicine, meeting amazing patients. But in me, you know, like this reconciliation of life and death is still a constant thing. And then realizing that medicine today, we're in denial about how we show up for patients because we don't know how to be human. We don't know how to talk about grief, loss, suffering, and death. And which really sparked the idea that we should be able to do this better, way better.
And so maybe you can share, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, thank you for your vulnerability and for, you know, you and Lindsay both, right? Every story is stories of how pain can lead to this acts of service. And now you're here helping, you know, cure and help a life through what you've gone through. So thank you so much for this whole journey. And, you know, one of the exciting outcomes of your vision and the story that you just shared is now how it connects to Reimagine Doctoring that we're launching. We've just launched together at Stanford. Maybe you can just share a couple words about what is manifesting through this.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think at this end of like contemplation and my doctor-patient relationship with Peter, and then now seeing Peter have more time, and you know, our clinic visits becomes very fun and social and just talk about life, you know, and I'm so excited for every trip you've taken. One day Peter said to me, and he was like, Stephanie, I want to fund $10,000 for any idea you have, and to make medicine better. And I was overwhelmed by kindness, and I honestly have trouble receiving kindness and love. I think through loss, sometimes I'm more comfortable with losing. And so when you offer that to me, I was overwhelmed, so appreciative. I had to dig really deep. And to this point, it's not even about anything. It's not even about money or fame or title. I'm just like, what is the thing that we really need today? And I am an educator at Stanford for cardiology fellows. And then I felt that physicians need to be healed.
What is
And
the
then
drug
so that we can bring,
methocarbamol doing?
yes. And so we can bring ourselves for our patients. And then so started meeting Brad, and then collaborating with this platform, really center around post-traumatic growth. And then now we 5 months of planning and have recruited 20 physicians from critical care medicine, from advanced heart failure, from bone marrow transplant, from hematology oncology. And we're just in a room meeting monthly on workshops on some of the hardest thing that no one wants to talk about. And we will be real with one another and support each other and really emerge as the better face of medicine.
The other piece of that story is that after we extended the $10,000 grant to Stephanie, she came back with this incredible proposal to run this program with the fellows. And so I was sitting talking to Jane and said, well, why don't we double our contribution? And Jane looked at me and she said, why would we do that? Let's give her what she needs. So we gave her $100,000.
It's incredible.
And if we can turn on the screen for 1 second, I'm screen sharing something. I just want to show everybody what it is that we are now doing together. Just a little sneak peek of what we launched just last week at Stanford. We've plugged into this platform that we've been working on. And here you see Reimagine Doctoring. Folks, they're able to sign into this platform. You can see here, this is what we've been working on for the last 2 years at Reimagine, a feed of people transforming their pain into beautiful things, into action, into service, into small ways of responding healthily, whether it's through reflections that people are taking, whether through creativity, people creating mini poems, sharing their emotional states, drawings, creating new dreams out of their pain. My dream is to build a greenhouse. My dream is to write and share short stories of my personal experience. My dream is to show up as my authentic self. And ultimately, people are inspired to take new actions in the world, powerful actions. I grew a frost-hardy garden as a lesson in resilience. I created illustrations about my grief and growth to honor my late mother. And so the currency here, we don't have a like button. Instead, we just have the holding space button. You simply sit with someone else's story, and you breathe and you slow down and you take in another person's journey in life. What if we all could just slow down and do this? This is the currency that we're creating this program around. And when you click into Reimagine Doctoring, what you just see, this was our first session that we held last week. And if you see the group feed, these physicians are just starting to share their own emerging journeys on the platform. Growth through caring for others. This person's intention is to integrate experiences of suffering seen as a physician into my life journey and to become a better husband and parent. And that was inspired by his own journey through loss and bereavement and health challenges and life transitions. Or I'll just conclude with this one, a listening heart. This physician is sharing their intention is to learn about myself so I can be present for others. Imagine if these are the kinds of stories that we can create at Stanford through these 20 people and eventually through the entirety of Stanford medicine, ultimately to all of the patients that are receiving care and ultimately to the entire world. So that's the vision that we have, that because of the generosity and the conviction of people on this stage tonight, we're starting to make happen in the world. Oh, so, all right. So thank you. So first of all, our one sentence response to Stephanie with the microphone so people online can hear it.
Well, I think she's a remarkable young lady. She's going to change the world.
I would just point out that, this is the beautiful example of leverage. Each of us can't do very much, but when we have someone like Stephanie, you can make a huge difference. And so think carefully about how you can use the leverage of your privilege, your position in life, through other people to make a difference. And I look at Stephanie and I think of Lindsay and Bethany and the other people that we've mentored. What an amplifier you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Big round of applause for Stephanie. Now, I am so excited to introduce our next panelist here. James Higa is the Executive Director of Philanthropic Ventures Foundation. PVF embraces radical collaboration and innovation to demonstrate what philanthropy could be. In addition to this, James has had a very long and storied career in Silicon Valley. He reported directly to Steve Jobs. As a musician myself, as you may see later, it is so exciting to be with him as he helped really spearhead the launch of iTunes that transformed all of music in the world. And he's just had a long career in philanthropy and investing and really shaping Silicon Valley, and has been part of this transformative gift that Peter's made through the foundation that ended up making its way to Reimagine doctoring. So I want to begin maybe more macro just for you. If you could just share a little bit about the role of philanthropy more generally in transforming, suffering.
I got to that answer through technology. I had a long career at Apple, started in the Macintosh group in '84, went to Next Computer, back to Cupertino, all told nearly 3 decades. And as I reflect on that career, I think about it a little bit differently in that I think of beauty. And what we were trying to do was to create more beauty in the world, to leave it more beautiful than when we found it. And perhaps the way we could do that is if we built the best personal computers that we could. Humankind's best tool to date, could it change the way people are informed, the way they are educated, the way they communicate with their loved ones? And in many ways, I think it has. And I left Apple after Steve passed away because I wanted to continue on that journey to create beauty, to lessen suffering, but through communities and through people. And it is my belief that you can transform the world just as much through people, through communities, as you can through technology. And the way to do that is to really think different and innovate. I'm a product guy. That's how I kind of view the world. And so we view Philanthropic Ventures Foundation as how do we change what philanthropy could be, what it might look like. And we're honored to be able to work with partners and donors like Peter and Jane, who embody that spirit of innovation and think different at Stanford Medical Center and at Intel. And our job to wake up every day is to manifest those ideas and those aspirations that are in your heart. And we want to be, when you go to one foundation after another and everyone is telling you no, we can't do that. No, it's too complicated. No, it takes too long. We want to be the people who say yes. So I do firmly believe that philanthropy can lessen suffering by making the world more beautiful. And I think the way to do that is to say yes instead of saying no.
Amen. So, in terms of the small world connection that we're all sharing together on this stage, when I was first connected to James through this relationship, and it turns out that James shared with us on that call that just the week prior, he had lost his own father. And it's obviously the work that we're involved in here at Reimagine. And you've spoken about the connection between, you know, that experience and the lessons you learned from Steve Jobs. Can you just share, you know, first of all, our heartfelt condolences to you and your family, and obviously you are living out the memory of your father and the way you're carrying forward in such a beautiful way and the impact you're making. But what how has that story of Steve Jobs, or what have you learned? How are you processing this, and what are you taking from that forward?
Well, the first thing, I mean, I lost my father end of September. It was miraculous timing. I grew up in Okinawa. He's there. I just happened to be there for a board meeting, serendipitously. And had it not been for that, I would not have had the chance to see him and speak to him the day prior to his passing. But I'm going through the Reimagine journey and the difficulty. He was my rock. He was the person who drove me to school, who was cheering me at the basketball games. He was the person who gave me the courage and the curiosity to face the world. And then to be put in the role of, now I have to take care of this person. Well, nobody told me how to do that. How do I deal with the doctors? How do I deal with the system? And had it not been for the kindness and support of my wife and my friends, I don't think I could have navigated that. So I wish all of this had been there for me, and I wish it for all the others who are going to go through this journey. Many of you know, I spent a long time working with and for Steve, and I think you've heard the story of his last words were looking up and he said, "Wow." And that's helped me reimagine how I think about the rest of my life, however short, however long it is to live right now. Why wait for the wow? I want to be able to say wow with all of you tonight. Why wait for saying wow tomorrow as I live tomorrow? And why wait for the wow for the day after that?
Wow. Oh, all right. Let's hear a one sentence synopsis of everything in your heart for James.
Boy, that's tough because
You can do it.
the thing I would say, the importance of being able to, the joy of giving from a warm hand. You know, don't wait until you die to give to other people. And there is no better mechanism for doing that than the Philanthropic Venture Foundation, which allows us to make donations, park the money there. I pick the phone up or an email to James or to Dawn. And I said, Jane and I would like to support this program at Stanford. And within 24 hours, it's done. And Bill Somerville, who was the founder with Tom Ford, said, we invest in people, not paper. And if you want to make an impact on other people, you know, look to James and Dawn to help you do that. And if you don't know what you want to do, they've got lots of great ideas. But give with a warm hand, because the beauty of giving a warm hand is you can get the joy of seeing it happen, as we're seeing with Stephanie's work right now. Sorry, it wasn't one sentence.
It was a long sentence. It was a one sentence. All right.
No.
Jane, well done, Jane. Thank you. Big hand for James. And now, last but not least, I want to introduce you to our final panelist for this evening. Yeah. I can stand up. Here, I'm coming over by my dad. Let's just say, okay. Dad, you sit over here. I don't know what's going to happen now, but I'm going to be in a shot. So hi, everyone on Zoom. Oh, wow, I got a seat. I was just going to stand up behind. All right, thank you so much. So it's nice to sit next to you. Our final panelist this evening is Dr. James Wolfe. He's an allergist and pulmonologist with over 45 years, still going in patient care, clinical research and teaching. He co-founded the penicillin skin test utilized by all allergists to diagnose whether patients are considered penicillin allergic. He's also a clinical professor of medicine at Stanford. And yes, in full disclosure, he is my favorite dad. And you've also been very connected rather on this journey of Reimagine. You've shown up in these experiences and participated. I'm curious, today, in some ways, you were the inspiration for this Why Wait theme. How did you first come across the Why Wait idea through Reimagine?
So I'm sorry, Brad, but I had a peek at the questions that might be coming my way. And so I can be long-winded, as you know, and so I put some thoughts to paper so I could be more efficient and keep us on time.
Thanks, Dad.
So when Brad said you have 4 minutes, no one had ever said that before. So when Reimagine was founded 8 years ago, I attended Reimagine's citywide festivals, the culture and arts festivals in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles. And then I joined in on Reimagine's frequent virtual events, 4,000. And I wasn't at all 4,000, but many of them. And also more recently, after COVID, the Reimagine Vigils, where I could observe guests, really bright people on Zoom, having these very meaningful conversations about how to deal with the hard parts of life. And embedded in these experiences, and what impacted me most was a life-changing concept, why wait? Which Brad memorialized in a song with these same two words. And this concept, for me, it captured the urgency, as Peter said, of living all of life fully and with meaning, including many of its challenges.
That's my dad. So when did you personally first recognize the power of this idea, why wait?
I am prepared. So I first saw the impact of why wait in 2019 when a ceremony took place in the US Capitol. And it was entitled Days of Remembrance, in which the few remaining living Holocaust survivors were honored, as were the US soldiers who had risked their lives to liberate the survivors from concentration camps. And my nearly 100-year-old mother at the time, a Holocaust survivor, she had been invited as an honoree to light one of the 6 remembrance candles at the ceremony. Well, living on the West Coast, there was no way to have her attend, given how difficult such a cross-country trip would be, and also her age, obviously. But the question, 2 small, powerful words inspired by Reimagine emerged and completely changed our perspective. Why wait? So we took my mother to Washington, D.C. And for her and for me and for the entire family, the event was one of the most meaningful life experiences for all of us. Moreover, my mother, Sally, she was able to see one last time her one remaining sister and brother-in-law. I was so grateful that we took to heart and acted upon what Reimagine had to say about life. Why wait?
I put a picture up. I didn't tell you that I had this. That's not part of the script I gave you, but here's Grandma and her sister together, reunited in that event. It was so special. So Dad, how have you gone on to implement the why wait concept in your personal life?
So I think I can best respond by providing a somewhat lengthy, I'll try to be short, example. But since experiencing how powerful this concept of why wait was, given the experience I had with my mother. I've been compelled to connect with and honor those who've impacted my life in both small and big ways. And I've been very fortunate to have had mentors whose influence changed the trajectory of my life. And one such mentor I want to talk about tonight was Holly Smith, Dr. Smith. Now, 50 years ago, when I was a senior medical student at UCSF, one of the truly great physicians and leaders in the history of UCSF, Dr. Holly Smith, chairman of the Department of Medicine, summoned me to his office. I was a wreck. I was completely nervous. Why would he want to see me? And Dr. Smith inquired as to why I was leaving during my senior year to spend 3 months at Harvard's ENT, ear, nose, and throat surgical program. And I informed Dr. Smith that I planned on becoming an ENT surgeon. At that point, without asking me, he picked up the phone and he called Dr. George Thorne, who was chairman of medicine at Harvard and founded the renal dialysis machine. And he arranged for me to spend 3 months in Boston, not on the ENT surgery unit, but rather on the internal medicine service. As I stood up to leave, Dr. Smith shook my hand and informed me, great surgeons are first great internists. I was flabbergasted and had no choice but to do internal medicine in Boston. At the end of my Boston experience, I decided to pursue a subspecialty in internal medicine and not ENT surgery. Those 3 months changed my career plans and my life. Do I have a couple just more minutes to
Ask Dara.
So here we go. Now spin the clock. Dara said yes. Now spin the clock ahead just a few years ago when I acted on Why Wait's important directive and arranged for a telephone meeting with Dr. Smith, now in his 90s and retired from UCSF. Our scheduled 15-minute planned conversation extended beyond an hour. He distinctly remembered that day 50 years ago and asked me in his Southern drawl. And so I informed Dr. Smith how upset I had been when I walked out of his office, but that the subsequent experience had been a life changer for me. I thanked Dr. Smith profusely. I could tell how meaningful for him the conversation had been, and I felt so grateful to have been able to express my gratitude to him. And before we hung up, Dr. Smith invited me to join him for lunch at his home the following month. But sadly and regrettably, he died before we could meet again, which only further underscored the importance of why wait. I can truly state that incorporating the philosophy of why wait into my daily life has been so meaningful, so enriching and fulfilling for me. It's changed the way I approach life, make decisions, and value others. So, Brad, thank you. And thank you to the staff, to everyone at Reimagine for making this possible.
That's where I get it. No, seriously, it is a really powerful story. And I, so what happened was, Peter then, I met Peter and he told me, actually, we don't need to do a living wake. I have a slightly new lease on life. I'm ready to do something different. And it's actually my lungs that are challenging. I said, you need to go see my dad. And so I picked up the phone and called my dad. My dad met Peter. on the phone, right? Diagnosed him on the phone, and the next thing you know, they had an office visit where upon maybe in just one sentence, again, you can share how, how this why wait concept then came into your life.
Well, it's going to be more than one sentence. That's okay. I have the sense that the audience isn't bored. Stephanie finally gathered enough information about my condition to be able to tell me on a Monday that given the procedure they had done the previous Friday, that, hey, my heart was okay. I wasn't going to die right away, but I was in horrible, horrible condition. I had terrific pulmonary complications, etc. I have received world-class care from the VA, but they're very understaffed in pulmonary. And Stephanie had been unable to arrange a visit for me to get a pulmonary consult. And I was literally falling apart at the seams emotionally because I really thought I was going to die, in spite of the fact of her saying, Peter, it's not going to be your heart. She put me in a wheelchair and rolled me into the emergency room and then called the pulmonologist so that she could get an appointment. And they provided me with short-term therapy, which made a significant difference. That was on the Monday. On the Wednesday, I met with Brad, having been linked up with Brad by Lindsay. And then having been linked up by Brad with his father, by Friday, I went to saw Jim, and he immediately took me under his care, established a long-term treatment program, which absolutely resolved the pulmonary issues. And really, between Stephanie and Jim, we were basically home free and a new lease on life. And in the conversation, after we sort of dealt with the clinical issues, as I always did with Stephanie, I got into a conversation with Jim about life and things like that. And he mentioned the why wait concept, which in fact he attributes to his son, Brad, having originated the phrase. But so this is just, it's an example of just how all these interconnections can come together in a time of need if you reach out to the people you care about, love, and know. And so that's how I connected with Stephanie and Brad and Jim, and all the pieces came together. And life consists of all these threads. And what's beautiful about the Reimagine concept is it's a period of time in which you can bring all these threads back together again and create a wonderful fabric by reuniting all the pieces that have been part of your life.
Well, thank you, Peter. And thank you, Dad. A big round of applause for my dad. I appreciate you scripting your answers in advance. That was never would have blew my mind. So we're going to wrap up this panel, and then we have one activity for you to close out the evening. We're going to wrap up this wonderful panel with this one question. And now this in advance was a one-sentence question for each panelist here. Thinking about, the hard parts of your life, the challenges that we all face, the themes of the event, the sparks that we each have in our own life. We all have hard things that we face, whether it's an inch or an ocean of water. What is one why wait you have right now in your life? One thing that you want to do to live now rather than wait. What is that one thing for you right now, tonight, in one sentence? And we're going to go in this order.
It's not a specific thing, but I think, as I think about loss, if I think about what we've been talking about today, it really all that we have in life is the connections that we make, and my heart touching yours. So, why wait for me is to have as many heart connections as I can, and to be able to touch hearts like Peter and Jane, and be able to take that love, take those ideas, take that passion, and bring it to life in the world.
Very, very much aligned. I don't want to wait anymore to bring my true self and just tell the story. And I'm full of gratitude, love, and I just want to give. And I hope I can help, you know, whoever's out there. If my story helps, that's what I'm here for. Yeah.
It's a little divergent. I think that there's not a day that doesn't go by in my recent life where a patient or multiple patients come to see me after a bit of time, and their first words are, "Thanks so much for having not retired. I can't believe you're still here." And after 48 years of working dawn to dusk, I really enjoy what I do. And like Stephanie, we've been given skill sets that just change the lives of people every day. There's not a day that doesn't go by really when a patient isn't so grateful for being able to sleep at night, be able to breathe. And so I don't really want to leave that, but I need, for me, a more balanced life, to have time to spend with the love of my life sitting there, and do more things with her and with the family, with the grandchildren, and have more time to participate in experiences like this. So it's not walking away from medicine, but it's combining medicine with other activities. And I think Peter and Jane, you spoke about that at the beginning of the event tonight, and I appreciate that.
Why wait? Well, I decided, because that's the partnership role with Peter, that we would have Christmas in Menlo Park this year. We haven't done for a number of years. We've always been going to England, and we managed. Because I wanted to do one thing. Other than that, and it conflicted, I wanted to visit my brother in England again, because he's turning 90. And I thought there may not be a 91st, so why wait? So we're managing to juggle both. We're going to be here for Christmas, and he's delayed his celebration of his birthday in England, so we're going early January to England.
So for me, it's to live in the here and the now. You know, why wait to tell your spouse you love her? Why wait to give that gift that you've always thought you wanted to give to some charity? Why wait to give advice that you wanted to give to one of your grandchildren? Why wait to embrace the love in the world? And so, Brad and the staff of Reimagine, thank you so much for tonight. And thank you for bringing us together, and hopefully all the people here and all the people watching on Zoom can share our joy and celebration of sharing what we've shared, and encouraging you to, in each of your individual times of crisis, to recognize that the greatest resource you have are the networks around you, and don't deal with tragedy alone. Share it, because that's the greatest love.